A major bust by the Rhode Island State Police. 41 kilograms of fentanyl off the streets tonight, and now 3 people are in custody.
October 25th, 2024. Falkland, British Columbia. Population 600 people. Ranchland, pine forest, and quiet roads that go nowhere interesting. Nobody comes to Falkland unless they already live there. On this particular Friday morning, that changes. RCMP, federal policing units, move on a rural property at the edge of town. Not regular officers, hazmat teams, explosive ordnance disposal, tactical units. The kind of response you send when you don't know what you're walking into. What they find inside stops them cold. Industrial chemical reactors bolted to the floor, vacuum filtration systems, pill presses, professional drying equipment, 390 kilograms of methamphetamine, packaged and ready to move, 54 kilograms of fentanyl, 89 firearms.
89 different firearms, tons of different chemicals that were used to produce these illicit drugs.
Including fully automatic weapons, $500,000 in cash, and enough fentanyl precursor material to produce 95.5 million lethal doses. The RCMP would later call it the largest, most sophisticated clandestine drug lab ever discovered in Canadian history. But here's what that headline doesn't tell you. This lab didn't appear overnight. Someone engineered it. Someone funded it. Someone supplied the chemicals, moved the product, and laundered the money. And for years, in a town of 600 people, nobody saw a thing. The question isn't just how this lab got built. It's who built it, who's behind them, and how far up the chain this actually goes. Chapter 1. The town that made no sense. Pull up a map of British Columbia and find Falkland. It sits about 50 kilometers northeast of Kamloops, deep in BC's interior. One main road, a handful of streets branching off it, a community hall, a few local businesses, ranches stretching out in every direction. The kind of place where people know their neighbors' vehicles by sound. Which makes what happened there either very stupid or very calculated. It was calculated. Drug enforcement analysts have documented a consistent pattern across North America. Cartel-linked manufacturing operations deliberately avoid cities. Urban labs mean neighbors, foot traffic, building inspectors, nosy landlords. Rural properties offer space for industrial equipment, chemical storage, and armed security. But they offer something else too. Plausible cover. A large outbuilding on a ranch property in BC's interior doesn't raise questions. It fits. The Falkland property was registered under a name with no obvious cartel connection. Industrial equipment arriving by truck? Looks like farm machinery from the road. Chemical deliveries blend right into the ordinary supply runs that rural properties get all the time. The operation wasn't hiding in spite of Falkland's character. It was hiding because of it. But a location this deliberate, this operationally precise, it doesn't get chosen by amateurs. Someone with serious organizational reach picked this town, and that reach has a name. Chapter 2. The Sinaloa Blueprint. The Sinaloa Cartel is not a gang. It's a multinational logistics company that happens to sell drugs. At its peak under Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, it controlled an estimated 40 to 60% of all drug traffic entering the United States. After Guzman's 2019 conviction,
Joaquin El Chapo Guzman became a billionaire running the Sinaloa drug cartel in Mexico that federal law enforcement agents say is still responsible for the lion's share of all illicit drug sales in Chicago.
The organization didn't collapse. It decentralized. Canadian law enforcement started documenting Sinaloa-linked activity in British Columbia as far back as the early 2000s. But the model that eventually produced Falkland took years to build. Here's how it works. The cartel doesn't send Mexican nationals to run Canadian operations. That's a liability. Instead, they partner with existing local organized crime networks.
Ir sin pensarla. Si no lo haces, hay que no te pegan una chinga y te sacan y te pegan una chinga alguien ganando.
In BC, that meant established cells with their own distribution infrastructure, their own street presence, and, crucially, their own relationships with chemical suppliers. The cartel provides the capital, the synthesis expertise, and the precursor supply chain. The local network provides the cover, the labor, and the distribution. It's a franchise model. Now, the precursor chemicals themselves travel a long road before reaching a lab in rural BC. Primary sources are manufacturers in China and India, shipping to Canadian ports under mislabeled manifests. N-methylformamide listed as industrial solvent. Ephedrine derivatives labeled as agricultural chemicals. At the Port of Vancouver, the Canada Border Services Agency estimates it inspects between 10 and 15% of flagged containers. The other 85 to 90%? They move through unchecked. From the port, chemicals get routed to shell company purchasers operating as legitimate industrial suppliers. Each order placed just below Health Canada's mandatory reporting threshold. Spread across enough suppliers, the full volume becomes invisible. By the time those chemicals arrive at a property outside Falkland, they're untraceable. The lab exists because the supply chain works, and the supply chain works because enormous amounts of money keep it moving. That money has to go somewhere. Chapter 3. The money has to go somewhere. Every kilogram of methamphetamine produced at Falkland had a street value of roughly 50,000 Canadian dollars. 390 kilograms seized in a single raid. That's one shipment from one lab on one day. The full annual output of an operation like this runs into the hundreds of millions. Cash at that scale is its own problem. You can't deposit it. You can't wire it. You can't explain it. Unless you've got a system already built to make dirty money look clean. In British Columbia, that system has a name investigators use quietly: the Vancouver model. It works like this. A drug dealer in the United States has USD cash that can't enter the banking system. A money broker connected to cartel networks takes the cash, charges a fee, and arranges for the equivalent value to be deposited into a Canadian account, sourced from drug proceeds already inside Canada. The US dealer gets clean wire transfers. The Canadian side gets fresh US dollars. Nobody moves the actual bills across the border. From there, the Canadian cash enters a second layer. BC casinos became notorious for a specific pattern. Individuals arriving with huge amounts of physical cash, purchasing chips, gambling minimally, cashing out as casino checks. Those checks are clean. They come from a licensed gaming establishment. A 2022 FinTrack report identified hundreds of suspicious transaction reports tied to this pattern at BC casinos, with individual transactions running into the tens of thousands per visit. The scale of the problem eventually forced a public response. In 2019, the BC government launched the Cullen Commission, a full public inquiry into money laundering across the province's real estate, gaming, and financial sectors. The Commission's final 2022 report concluded that billions of dollars in illicit funds had moved through BC's economy over the preceding decade, enabled by regulatory gaps that were identified, reported, and never closed. Here's the thing. The laundering infrastructure wasn't built in response to the Falkland Lab. It was built years before the lab even existed. By the time those chemical reactors were bolted to the floor in rural BC, the financial architecture to absorb the profits was already running smoothly. The lab was the last piece of the puzzle, not the first. So how did all of this stay invisible for so long? Chapter 4. How nobody noticed. The short answer? Several agencies noticed pieces of it. The longer answer is that noticing pieces and stopping the whole machine are two completely different things. Start with the chemical supply chain. Health Canada requires suppliers to report purchases of controlled precursor chemicals above specific quantity thresholds. The threshold for many meth precursors sits at 1 kilogram. Cartel procurement networks place orders of 900 grams across 6 different suppliers in 6 different cities under 6 different shell company names. No single order triggers a report. The full volume never appears on one document. Health Canada's monitoring system was designed to catch bulk buyers. It was never built to catch distributed networks buying in coordinated fragments. At the port level, CBSA faces a structural problem that's got nothing to do with effort. Vancouver handles over 3 million shipping containers per year. With current inspection capacity, flagging and physically opening a container takes hours. The math just doesn't work at scale. And cartel logistics teams know the math. Mislabeled shipments move through, not because inspectors are corrupt, but because there aren't enough inspectors and there isn't enough time. The cumulative result of these gaps shows up in the numbers. Since 2018, RCMP and local police have identified and dismantled close to 50 clandestine drug labs and super labs across Canada. In October 2024, the RCMP confirmed that a Mexican cartel-linked criminal network had been moving large amounts of methamphetamine and cocaine through Canada and overseas. Falkland wasn't an isolated incident. It was a data point in a pattern. On the ground in rural BC, the violence communities were reporting from 2021 to 2023. It was real, and it was connected. Multiple organized crime homicides in the Lower Mainland during that period were tied to the same transnational networks supplying the Falkland operation. What looked like gang warfare over street territory was actually supply chain enforcement. Disputes over precursor deliveries, debts between distribution cells, territorial boundaries between franchise operators. The violence was management. Residents reported the killings. Police investigated individual cases. But nobody publicly connected the pattern to an industrial drug manufacturing operation sitting in a farming community 3 hours away. When the RCMP Federal Policing Unit finally moved on the Falkland property, it wasn't because the system caught a signal. It was because one specific thread, pulled from one specific investigation, eventually led somewhere nobody expected. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. The RCMP hasn't publicly disclosed the full investigative thread that led to Falkland. What we do know is the operation involved coordination between RCMP Federal Policing, the Canada Border Services Agency, and U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration intelligence. That DEA involvement matters. American agencies have been tracking Sinaloa cartel expansion into Canadian territory for years. Cross-border intelligence sharing gave Canadian investigators structural information about the franchise networks operating in BC that domestic surveillance alone couldn't have built. The raid on October 25th wasn't a lucky discovery. It was the endpoint of a multi-agency investigation that likely ran for months, possibly longer. Here's what the seizure actually represents in practical terms. Street value of the recovered meth alone, approximately 19.5 million Canadian dollars. The fentanyl, had it been processed and distributed, carried a potential street value multiple times higher, and 95.5 million lethal doses. That's not a number that fits inside a normal frame of reference. British Columbia's entire population is roughly 5.3 million people. The precursor material in that one property could have produced enough fentanyl to kill every person in BC 18 times over. Arrests were made. Charges were laid. The RCMP described the operation as a significant disruption to organized crime activity in the region.
I'm here today to provide information on the arrest of an individual on May 22nd of this year that we allege has been violating.
But disruption isn't dismantlement. The franchise model that built Falkland doesn't depend on any single lab. The Sinaloa cartel's Canadian networks still have access to port infrastructure, chemical supply chains, money laundering architecture, and local organized crime partnerships. One property in a town of 600 people has been shut down. The system that chose that town, built that lab, and ran it undetected for years. It remains largely intact. That part never makes the headline. Regulatory frameworks that couldn't catch fragmented chemical orders. Port inspection capacity that can't keep pace with container volume. Financial monitoring systems that flagged billions in suspicious activity and produced a fraction of the prosecutions those findings warranted. These aren't failures of individual officers or analysts who weren't paying attention. They're structural failures, institutional gaps that were known, documented, and left open. The Falkland Superlab was built inside those gaps. And until those gaps close, something else will be built inside them too. If you want to see the next shadow organization we're exposing, click and subscribe on the screen right now.